Well, sisters and brothers, I'm delighted to be in Nashville again and with you, all of you who are gathered here. I appreciate this introduction. To walk these streets briefly as I've done is wonderful. Tennessee is one of my home states since I worked here for 17 years, and all three of our sons were born in Nashville and Memphis. So it's always a great privilege for me to be able to be here in Nashville, and especially on this occasion when we're designing a street as the John Lewis Way. And you have no idea how much I've been impacted by that news and by the various contacts that have been made with me in LA, and therefore results in my being here today. I will try to be quite brief, but I've been asked to present briefly where we came from, Nashville. From 1952, in my studies in college, in my practice of nonviolence, which I did not call it that then. I called it what it meant to follow Jesus. That was my mantra and still is my mantra. But in going to college in 47, I read the autobiography of Gandhi and recognized instantly that while the ancient world did not speak of nonviolence, that's what it was, and adopted his language and began then to continue my study in the United States, Europe, Asia, Africa, on the many different ways that nonviolence has been practiced across the human race, but has been left out of the books. It was not called nonviolence back there, and it was not seen as a eternal intervention to teach the human race who we ought to be and how we ought to live. And I owe that to Gandhi's intervention of 1906 and 1920. And I was planning to work in the South when I finished my graduate degrees. But shaking hands with Martin Luther King Jr. on February the 6th, 1957, where we had those very invisible connections and recognized our call to history and judgment. And Martin King said to me, "Come now, don't wait." So by January of 58, I had moved into Nashville as the Southern Secretary for the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The film is incorrect. Fellowship of Reconciliation, as the Southern Secretary, which meant I became a troubleshooter. I went to many of the places where black folk were taking deep breaths and beginning to flex their muscles, their morality, and their spirit of truth to say, this is the end of it. We're going to stop this vicious system of racism and segregation. Martin King was very much concerned for when the next major campaign would be, and many of us who joined him, Kelly Miller Smith, Andrew White from Nashville, were people who had joined him. And in my travels, I decided that the second major campaign had to take place in Nashville. We had to demonstrate in Nashville the strategic capacities for nonviolent struggle and how they could be used. And so I said this to Kelly Miller Smith and others, and we agreed that we were going to have that campaign that the nation needed to have following up the Montgomery bus boycott. And so we met for 6 months, weekly Saturday morning at different churches, and we decided, and it was the black women who made that decision, for me at least, and for others, that what we had to do was unheard of. And I'll never forget, as we, in June, decided we will desegregate downtown Nashville, I heard the inner voice saying, "Do you know what you've just done?" And how are we going to do this? But the decision was made by some 30 to 60 people who came to the weekly Saturday morning sessions to make the decision, where do we start? Desegregate downtown Nashville. There were some hints that that should become the strategy from elsewhere, including the Montgomery bus boycott. But the Nashville campaign added to the essential NAACP strategy: make racism and segregation and Jim Crow law illegal and unconstitutional, which they did. And so the Nashville campaign then settled the business of a second major strategy, that is to desegregate public life, pull the signs down, change the restrooms to men, women, stop the hostility of every downtown community where black folk shopping for shoes or clothing had no places where they could really sit down and rest their feet. And so that strategy of desegregation became the Nashville target for change. And so as a nonviolent practitioner and organizer and reflector, I planned a basic strategy. We worked for, we rested during the summer, but in the fall we began workshops to prepare ourselves. I do not use the word training. I use the word preparation. We did that from September to December, once a week, and we went through the history and the theory and the practice and the many people of nonviolence in the history of the human race. Actually, we of the human race use more nonviolence than we use violence. For example, if you have been a baby and your parents loved you and they nurtured you in truth and beauty and belonging, they were coaching you and raising you in the essential philosophy behind nonviolence, namely love and compassion and truth. Love is powerful. God gave it to us as the major source of the power of being alive. How we learn to hate, I do not know. But what is at the heart of my philosophy and my understanding of nonviolent struggle is that the great gift of life from creation is also the gift of the powers of love. And if we would stop postponing it, if we would begin to simply use it, as Gandhi said and King insisted, if we would simply recognize the gift of life is the gift of the greatest power of the universe, love, compassion, truth. And if we would allow that to be the ways in which we organized our lives, and most of us do in certain personal ways, but the big task in the 21st century is that we move to let love be the power in which we organize every facet of society. Every facet of society. And I happen to think that that can be done, that hatred can be replaced with love, that violence can be replaced with satyagraha, with truth, with beauty, with the spirit. I happen to think that can happen, and that we can beat our swords into plowshares, our spears into pruning hooks. Nashville, for me, is a wonderful illustration of where this happened before and must continue to happen. Nashville became the model for the desegregation of public life in more than, according to Professor Sekou Franklin, who's been learning about it, in more than 200 cities across the Southeast. This is not to count the cities in the north, New England in the west, but just the cities in the southeastern part of the country, more than 200 in the next 4 to 10 years began the process of desegregation. Now I'm going to do something that I have probably never done before. I want to address my final remarks here at this point to Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. I haven't had a chance yet to read the screenplay, which a friend of mine has found and made copies of it for me. It's in my study space at home, and I've not had to read it, but it's a screenplay called Tombstone. It is a part of the Western lore, Tombstone, the southeastern part of Arizona, and the life of Wyatt Earp, a historical figure out of the West, and Doc Holliday, and their struggle with the assassination and of two of the brothers, Earp brothers, and the crippling of a third one. And Wyatt Earp forms the posse to go after the cowboys who have done the killing and the assassinations. Wyatt Earp has what was called consumption or lung disease. And in the process of the chase, he gets very sick, so he lands in the Hooker Ranch and is put to bed. And Wyatt, who's going to leave him at the ranch, goes in to talk with him. And Wyatt Earp says, Doc, on the cowboys, why are they so angry? And Doc says, they are angry because they were born to be human. and they don't like being human. Well, why did they hate us so? Comes back Wyatt Earp's question. And Doc Holliday says something like this, which is one of the reasons I'm reading the whole script as soon as I can. He says they have a hole down the middle of their souls. What I want to say to Bill Lee is something like this. I do not know how you were raised. I have no doubt that your parents loved you and greeted you with great joy when you were born. And they sought in every way they knew how to love you. But somehow you have lived in this world and in this state of Tennessee and allowed a hole to move down the middle of your soul. That means you have rejected the fact that you have been birthed by creation to come alive, to be a human being, to be in the design and in the imagination of God. Or if you don't like to use the word God, then say of whatever energy that created this fabulous, extraordinary human species. You have a hole down the middle of your soul. You act like you act because you are moving in the wrong direction of your own life. Now, sisters and brothers, I know that lots of us are too enmeshed in this culture of violence of ours. I think our country, in contradiction to the marvel of 330 million people, our country has become the most violent society known to history. That means that far too many people live not out of their heart, not out of the remarkable gift of life, not out of their souls, not out of their minds, not out of their recognition of their neighbors, but they operate out of that massive hole down the middle of their souls that keeps them acting in contradiction to their own lives. Part of the power that happened in Nashville that brought us to this place where we're naming the John Lewis Way is because some of us are learning to live, learning to love, learning to see our fellow human beings in the human family, and know that what we have seen and what we have heard and what we are feeling must be the way we live and work, because the John Lewis Way is a sign of the new Nashville that is yet emerging. No human being in their right mind should say ever, I'm not going to be alive. I'm not going to be fully human. I'm not going to love. I'm not going to do justice. I'm not to do equality. That is an invitation from eternity to be the daughters and sons of life, of God, of the extraordinary universe in which we live. And in that journey, Bill Lee, you'd be surprised what kind of human you would become.